Currently, it is 35 degrees here on the campus of St. Louis Community College at Florissant Valley. I'm Jell with your noon news update. Authorities are investigating a double homicide in St. Louis. Police say 2 men were shot and killed last night near North Market and Dick Gregory. No arrests have been made. The victims haven't been identified. An investigation is underway after a loaded gun was stolen from a student at Belleville, West High School. The incident happened yesterday, which caused the school to be placed on lockdown. Police say the student had the gun in his book bag. He put the bag in a locker for gym class. He then returned to the locker and discovered the weapon had been taken. 2 people are accused of robbing a Washington University student on campus last week. Gerald Sharp, Jr., has been charged with robbery, and a 14-year-old was also taken into custody. Police say the victim was walking yesterday in the 6100 block of Trinity Avenue when 2 people approached. One of the suspects knocked the student to the ground before the robbers took his phone and ran off. And police are searching for a man accused of taking the tip jar from a restaurant in O'Fallon, Illinois. Authorities say the suspects entered Sugar Fire Smokehouse barbecue restaurant Saturday and asked for a job application. He then took off with the tip jar when the manager went to get the paperwork. It wasn't clear how much was taken. In campus news, what have we got? Because, A, it's African American History Month here at Florissant Valley Community College, St. Louis Community College in general. Today, that's already over. Let's see. Thursday, February 14th, we have from 11 a.m. to noon in the Student Center Multipurpose Room, we have the African American Higher Education Experience. This presentation will chronologically track the journey of African American higher education experience. Attendees will learn about the historical struggles, sacrifices, and contributions made by African Americans towards educational attainment. Monday, February 25th, from 11 a.m. to noon in the Student Center Multipurpose Room is a Lunch and Learn African-American Leaders and Activists in Troubling Times. And then Wednesday, February 27th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the Student Center Multipurpose Room is the Black Queer History Panel. Let's see, we also have... Yeah, that's some stuff. So those are some of the events we have going on for African American History Month here at St. Louis Community College. Now, on to the weather. Today, it is partly cloudy and windy with a high of 36, low of 22. Tomorrow, it will be partly cloudy with a high of 47, low of 41. Thursday, cloudy, high of 55, low of 24. Friday, we've got evening snow showers with a high of 31, low of 20. And Saturday, partly cloudy with a high of 34, low of 26. Currently, it's 35 degrees here at KCFV. I'm Jell, and this has been your noon news update. But please stay tuned, because after a short break, we will be back with GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which generally plans to air every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m., though we've had some complications. We will discuss that after the break. But we like to kick the show off with the new game releases for this week, what's coming out next week, and what anime are in theaters, before moving on to all sorts of different video game news and information. But until then, here is Jump by Brooke Royal featuring Clint Lowry, here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. That was Jump by Brooke Royal featuring Clint Lowry, here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which generally aims to air every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. However, we've had some slight complications, namely, good ones, though. For me, anyway, not for you. Basically, I have gotten a job offer, and that might maybe take up all of my free time. Now, the guy in charge makes it sound like he might have some pretty flexible hours for me. I still need to discuss this. But if the hours are flexible enough, I'll keep doing the show. But there's a chance that there might not be a show next week. We'll find out. We'll all find out the hard way, right? But I'm going to try to do a show next week. We'll find out what happens together, won't we? Anyway, so we like to kick the show off with the new game releases for this week, what's coming out next week, and what anime are in theaters. So let's kick that off right proper. First of all, this week on PlayStation 4, we have Alvastia Chronicles, which I was just looking up. That's one of Kemco's friggin' mobile RPGs. For those unfamiliar, Kemco, long-running Japanese company, has, for the past couple years, been releasing a new Japanese RPG for mobile phones every single month. And some of these are starting to come to consoles and stuff. You know, consoles, portables, other systems. They're porting them. And this Alva Vista Chronicles, I'm reading up on it. I might almost maybe be interested in this one. But we'll find out. We will certainly find out. Anyway, after that, we've got Canarium, then Descent, as in the old PC game where you spin around 360 degrees and it was compatible with a billion different wacky controllers. Yeah, that Descent, yeah, it's coming to, it's PS4 and Xbox One now. It's here, okay. Eden Tomorrow, Hacky Zack, Hyper Jam, Jump Force Ultimate Edition, Meow Motors, Mix-Ups by Paugi, The King's Bird, The Liar Princess and the Blind Prince, The Sims 4 Get Famous, Zing, The Land Beyond, which I know is a PlayStation VR adventure game. Then we've got Minesweeper Genius. Then Code Realize, Wintertide Miracles, Degrees of Separation, and Nekopara Volume 2. Although you probably don't want that on PlayStation 4 due to the fact that it will likely, once again, be heavily censored. Friendly reminders. Then we've got 8-Bit Armies Limited Edition, DreamWorks Dragons Dawn of New Riders, Far Cry New Dawn, Jump Force Regular Edition hitting this Friday, Metro Exodus, and Rim 9000. Xbox One is getting Canarium, Descent, Hyper Jam, Jump Force Ultimate Edition, Minesweeper Genius, The King's Bird, Degrees of Separation, 8-Bit Armies Limited Edition. Crackdown 3 is finally coming, although it's not looking as promising as we were hoping. Then DreamWorks Dragons, Dawn of New Riders, Far Cry New Dawn, Far Cry New Dawn, Hacky Zack, Jump Force, Metro Exodus. And yeah, the Nintendo Switch, what you got for us? Ooh, good. Switch is getting Minesweeper Genius, The King's Bird, The Liar Princess and the Blind Prince, Iron Cryptical, Alchemic Dungeons DX, Alvastia Chronicles, so that's what I was going, ooh, that's good, is finding out that's going to be Switch and PS4. I'm gonna look into that on the Switch. Seems like it might be a thing. I will be looking into that. Let's see. Then Astrology and Horoscopes Premium, Cinders, Degrees of Separation, Ghoul Boy, Guess the Word, Hexamaze, Love, Modern Combat, Blackout, Nekopara Volume 2, which the Switch version will be significantly less censored than the PlayStation 4 version. Friendly reminder. Ali Ali, Switch Stance, Pet Care, Space War Arena, Strikey Sisters, Tokyo School Life, Toho Sky Arena Matsuri Climax, then DreamWorks Dragons Dawn of New Riders. I want to put a "the" in there, and there's no "the." Space Lift Danger Panic. Moving on, the 3DS this week has Love Hero, and the PlayStation Vita this week has Alvastia Chronicles, Mix-Ups by Paugi, and Code Realize Wintertide Miracles. So that sums up the game releases for this week. What about next week? What's coming out? Well, the PlayStation 4 next week will be getting Death End Request, Steins Gate Elite Limited Edition, Unexplored Unlocked Edition, Nier Automata Game of the Yorha Edition. So many editions. Anthem, Dirt Rally 2.0 Digital Deluxe Edition. And that would be it for what we know. For next week, Xbox One next week is getting Anthem Unexplored Unlocked Edition. And That's all we know. Switch next week is getting 8-Bit Adventures Steins Gate Elite Limited Edition, Almost There, the platformer, Origami Shadow Edition, Devil Engine, Gigantic Army, Hell Warders, QUBE2, Rotating Brave, that's a name, Warplanes, World War II Dogfight, Exmorph Defense, Yume Nikki Dream Diary, Quest for the Golden Duck, Tyr Chains of Valhalla, and yeah, that sums that up for next week. 3DS next week is getting nothing, and PlayStation Vita next week is getting Penny Punching Princess, The Longest 5 Minutes, and The Lost Child. So those are our new game releases for this week and next week. What about anime in theaters? Well, doesn't entirely count, but Alita Battle Angel does open this week, February 14th. It's kind of done a number on, obviously it's based on the manga and anime series Battle Angel Alita, and it's kind of done a number on the copyright for that, so I don't know, it's a little bit of a weird one. Let's see, February 17th, there's Bang Dream Let's Go Poppin' Party, which is like a virtual idol concert thing. Okay. Seeing a lot of Toronto-only ones on this list. Oh, here we go. No, that's in March. Shoot. That's April. Huh. I swear there were more releases here. And strangely, one of them disappeared. Mobile Suit Gundam NT, which apparently stands for Narrative, will be in theaters on the 19th, dubbed only. Weirdly, like, the closest one to us that's going to be showing it is, Ronnie's Cine. It's going to be at the Savoy 16 with IMAX and AMC Evansville 16, but those are all a bit of a drive. I'd like to see that, but it might be a little tricky for me to get there. A bit of a shame. Doesn't help that the Mills Theater closed down. No surprise there. Yes, that did finally close. Anyway, that sums up our new game releases for this week. What's coming out next week and what anime are in theaters. I need to look over a better list. This one just got weird. I was using the one from Yadatachi, which had been doing a really good job of keeping up on these, but now it's like, for some reason, Gundam disappeared for it, and they added in a bunch of, like, Toronto, Ontario only ones. So I'm going to have to find out what's going on with all of that. Either way, those are certainly our games and anime for this week. I do believe, of course, that means it is time for us to take a quick break. And when we get back, maybe not too quick of a break, but after a short break, when we get back, we will begin talking about the video game news and information of the week. Admittedly, not too terribly much going on, and as usual, doesn't help, Nintendo's announced a Nintendo Direct for tomorrow. You know, the day after I could use one of those. I could talk about a Nintendo Direct all friggin' day, but no, that's gonna be tomorrow, after the show. Thanks, Nintendo. I think most of this show is mostly gonna be me looking at the weird state that gaming is in. Because yes, if you've been wondering when the next big video game crash is, the answer is about now. It's happening. Don't worry. We'll come out the other end better for it. Because the things that are crashing, for the most part, are things that needed to. Either way, though. Time for us to kick you back to the music. So here is I Still Miss You by Matt Wynn. Here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay tuned for more GameBabble Live. That was Do Ya Own by Louis V, Shorty the Kid, and Loudy here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m., or at least that's the plan. Currently have a job offer, might get in the way of doing the show. We'll find out. You know what else is getting in the way of doing the show? My stupid laptop. This thing, for the past while, has been perfectly fine with, being closed and going into sleep mode. But recently, it's decided every time I close it, instead of going into sleep mode, it's just going to completely shut itself off. So, my show notes that I pulled up before the show and emailed to myself, are not coming up. Because they were open, and then the computer just decided to restart without my permission while it was closed. So, now I'm trying to log into my email, and it's just not going. Because of course it's not. No, we can't. Things can't be easy around here. And cripes. Like, I'm trying to log in through the website and through the actual, like, in-system mail program, and everything's running ludicrously slow. This is why I'm so glad I got a new computer at home. But yes, this laptop is, barely plugging along. It's funny, I haven't really done that much. Isn't that one of the most interesting mysteries of computers? How they just get slower and slower over time, even if you barely do anything to them. I mean, this laptop is pretty much just for schoolwork and my show notes and watching YouTube. And yet, somehow, it just gets slower and slower and slower every single time. It's like, I'm sure it's collecting some kind of crap, and I don't know how to clean it off. And, of course, there's a bajillion different programs out there that claim they will speed up your computer, and I don't trust a single freaking one of them. And I certainly wouldn't. Anyway, enough about that. I decided to look into that Alvastia Chronicles game, and that wound up getting interesting. Like I said, it's out today on a bunch of systems. Comes out the 14th on Switch. And yeah, it's from Kemco, and Kemco has been releasing a new old-school JRPG on Android and iOS every month for the past couple of years. And some of them are a little by the books and disappointing. Some are actually kind of interesting and fun. They have, like, multiple studios working on them. They're clearly using, like, an in-house version of RPG Maker. It's not RPG Maker, but, like, some kind of in-house toolkit to make these games. Honestly, I'm surprised they turn out as good as they do. And yeah, they've started porting these to home systems. Alvastia Chronicles is some kind of retro-style JRPG with the central gimmick being that there are over 100 characters that you can recruit, and you have 13 character battles where they're grouped up into, like, clusters. It almost reminds me of, like, The Last Remnant if it was faux 8-bit. I'm like, okay, I'm a little interested in this. I'm also amused because one of the main characters they show is an ogre girl named Rain who looks identical to the ogres from Dragon Quest X, to the point where they could sue for that. And Dragon Quest X has very, very distinctive ogres designed by Akira Toriyama because it's Dragon Quest. Basically, they're people except with more spikes. And yeah, so I'm like, okay, so they could just sue you for that character. But so I'm watching this. I'm looking through this. I pop up the trailer, put it on mute so it's not interfering with things, and I notice something. The kind of thing that would only sell me on a game. At the bottom of the screen, it says, music composed by Ryuji Sasai. And I'm like, Ryuji Sasai? Is that? No, it couldn't be. Could it? And I looked him up, and sure enough, it's that Ryuji Sasai. Who's Ryuji Sasai? He's the composer for Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. But Jell, you say, wasn't Final Fantasy Mystic Quest a terrible game? Yes, a terrible game with fantastic music. That was, like, listen to anyone talk about Mystic Quest, and they will say, the one good thing about it was the soundtrack, which was phenomenal. Mystic Quest, if you don't remember, was the Final Fantasy made to introduce America to RPGs because at the time they believed that America didn't like Japanese RPGs because we didn't know how to play. Mystic Quest was created to teach us how to play, and in order to make it appeal more to Americans, it had an amazing rock soundtrack by Ryuji Sasai. He hasn't done a lot of work. Apparently his earliest work is actually working with Haim Saban and Shuki Levy on the soundtrack for the mysterious cities of gold, of all things. He did Final Fantasy Legend 3 and Mystic Quest, did some work on Tobal No. 1, and the last game he worked on was Bushido Blade 2. Since then, he went off to go join a Queen cover band. So, we haven't heard from this guy since 1998, and all of a sudden he just pops up doing music for a random Kemco mobile RPG. And obviously, there's some music in this trailer. But I didn't want to, interfere with the broadcast, so I haven't heard it yet. So we're going to listen to the music in this trailer together, because I want to hear this. I want to know what we're dealing with here. I need to hear this music. So, go listen to this together. Let's find out how it is. Okay, yeah, no, that did sound about right. Obviously, they're going for a retro sound. The game has a 8-bit look to it. Yeah, no, I want to know what the battle music sounds like, because I think that sounds like sort of overworldy music. I'm very interested. Apparently it's out on Steam now, so I could look it up that way, but still, very interesting. I just fancy seeing you here again, Ryuji Sasai. Unfortunately, still having struggles getting my email to freaking pop up. Let's try that again. I've been having all sorts of web browser troubles today. Like, I tried to bring up the news report in Google Chrome on the freaking computers here, and it just didn't feel like loading, so I closed it, tried to reboot Google Chrome. Oh, wait, I don't feel like it, screw you. Okay, fine. Be that way. Hold on. Let us try. Closed and reopened the Firefox on my laptop. Go see if I can get this list up. But if not, we'll just dive right into talking about everything falling apart, I guess. Oh, that password is so appropriate. Please do not save that password. And it's stuck. Good. That's fantastic. That's stuck. If I could figure out how to get into the temporary files I loaded before the computer decided to be stupid, that would help. But I don't see that happening. This is going to take some doing. And oh yeah, it is. It's going slow. Magical. Absolutely magical. Okay, well, everything is on fire. The AAA gaming world is kind of coming apart at the seams, as it very much deserves to. And a lot of this is just due to the weird nature of publicly traded companies. Namely, that people keep expecting companies to make exponentially more and more and more money. You can't just, be steady. You can't just make the same profits. You always have to be making more profits, and more profits than last year, and so on. And as such, eventually you have to reach market saturation. Eventually you reach the point where everyone who is ever going to be interested in your game has already bought your game, and they're starting to lose interest, and then what do you do? And we're seeing a lot of AAA game companies laying off a lot of people. We're seeing a lot of them being very disappointed in their what should be good sales of games. We are seeing sales of games starting to drop off. We're seeing a lot of companies coming apart at the seams. Apparently, a lot of people... The bad news is that Blizzard certainly does not look like they're going to be doing very well. A lot of people at Blizzard had been fearing for their jobs for a while now. A lot are getting out while the getting's good. And, well, you know what went down at BlizzCon. You know that Blizzard has lost their shield of invulnerability. Blizzard had a very dedicated fan base, many of which felt Blizzard could do no wrong, constantly defended them, were always on their side. And after the Diablo Immortal debacle, a lot of them have opened their eyes and they've realized, oh, wait a second, Blizzard isn't the same Blizzard I used to love. Diablo 3's launch was a disaster. It took them forever to kind of sort of fix the game. And, Overwatch was kind of an unfinished game. A lot of people are very displeased with the current state of World of Warcraft, especially after the recent expansion. People are split on the Warcraft 3 remake that's going to bring the lore more in line with World of Warcraft. A lot of people don't really like that, and they'd rather have the opposite of having World of Warcraft's lore be more like Warcraft. So there's a lot of fighting going on there. Overwatch is losing players, and in fact, they've actually dropped the price of Overwatch across the board, like quietly, out of nowhere. Overwatch is just cheaper now, which is good because it should have been free to play in the first place, if you ask me. Nothing about Overwatch felt like it should have been a full-price game. At all. I mean, it's polished, it's got great character designs, but you're expecting me to pay full price for an online-only game? Overwatch still drives me nuts because the central focus that they advertised was the characters and the story that are nowhere to be found in the game. The game itself is not canon to the game. That doesn't even make sense. The long and short of it is, I want a campaign mode in Overwatch. If you want to know what would get me to buy Overwatch, it would be a campaign and some kind of offline play. And apparently they had a co-op campaign for like a month or two as a special event, and then it goes away, and a lot of people were like, what the heck? We want more of that. That was what we wanted out of Overwatch. Why would you take that away? And Overwatch just hasn't really... I haven't seen them updating as much as they really should be. And yeah, it does kind of seem like that game's circling the drain. Circling the drain even faster was Heroes of the Storm, which had its esports support completely pulled, causing tons of people to lose their job. And pretty much that whole game is rapidly collapsing. Like, Blizzard's not in great shape. Bethesda, meanwhile, can't stop screwing up with Fallout 76. I love the fact that they actually managed to get a Y2K bug in the game on accident. So they were screwing up all the way to the end of the year because once it turned 2019, all the nukes broke because they weren't prepared for 2019. It was exactly the same as what the Y2K bug was supposed to be, where the computer just couldn't handle the idea of year 0, except in this case, for some reason, it couldn't handle the idea of year 19. Good job, Bethesda. And just everything Bethesda's done has just made it worse. At this point, Fallout 76 is very much a just stop and cut your losses. There's no rescuing this game. Because now the schadenfreude is kicked in. Now people are just pointing and laughing at everything you do with Fallout 76. You can't save it. You need to stop. You need to leave it alone. You need to find some way to just stabilize it. And that's a problem because, of course, they were banking on all this DLC monetization. It's a mess. So Bethesda's not looking good. Blizzard's not looking good. Activision as a whole is not looking good. EA has actually had their stocks drop the most they have ever dropped in the history of the company, or at least in a very long time. So EA is not looking good. A lot of American companies a lot of the big AAA companies, even Take-Two, the people in charge of publishing Rockstar stuff, of Grand Theft Auto, they're kind of feeling the squeeze. A lot of the AAA gaming industry is starting to dry up, which makes sense because things have just gotten out of control. There's too much DLC. They're acting... Basically, we have a lot of full-price boxed releases acting way too much like free-to-play games, and at that point, why don't you just play a free-to-play game if there's no advantage to these big, expensive boxed releases? Other than, okay, fine, they're pretty, they're fancy, but yeah. The AAA market is drying up, as it kind of should. this isn't how games were meant to be released. This isn't how it's supposed to work. So, yeah, I get it. I definitely get why this is a problem. So, yeah, that's where the AAA industry is going. We'll talk more about this after the break, especially if I can't get my freaking show notes to freaking come up. Thank you, technology. Fantastic. So, we're going to take a break, and then after the break, we will be back with more GameBabble Live of some form or another. Until then, here is You Like That by MZ007 here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. That was No Brainer by DJ Khaled featuring Chance the Rapper here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back once again to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. So, still no luck getting my actual show notes up, so let's get back to what we were talking about with the AAA game industry and the strange state it currently finds itself in. Now, during that break, I was actually stopped by a gentleman here in the offices saying, yeah, what do you mean AAA gaming's going down? Hollywood's been doing big-budget blockbuster movies with ludicrous budgets for a while, and it still remains afloat, which, for the record, is a mystery to me. But that is a point. So, before we continue, let us define the AAA game and talk about how things used to be. I know I've talked about this on the show before, but basically, I define the AAA game is indeed the video game equivalent of the big-budget Hollywood movie. They're the ones that get tons of advertisement and a huge budget behind them, and they get all the TV commercials and the fanciest graphics, and they're the ones that get pushed the most. I don't know what we would use as a definition, like a hard definition of a AAA game, but it is the kind of thing where it's like, you know it when you see it. And these are actually a relatively recent occurrence. I'd say AAA gaming started around 2006, thereabouts. And you're probably going to say, well, what do you mean? How has AAA gaming not always been a thing? Well, if you go back to the past, the way video games used to be made, the more functional way of doing it, was when you had a game idea and you pitched it at your company and they said, okay, we're going to make this. It was generally made on a sort of middling budget. You make your first game and you throw it out there. Not quite a proof of concept, but it's it's a first attempt at the game. You throw it out there with a middling budget. You see if anyone bites. And if if the game sells, if people like the concept, and it does well, then you look at the responses. What did people like? What did people not like? What can we do to improve the game? And then the sequel is where you put your big budget. And that was the closest we had to a AAA game. My favorite example, one of the easiest examples, is Resident Evil. Resident Evil 1 for PS1 was not the equivalent of a AAA game. It was very middle budget. It was very, hey, here's a kooky idea. Let's test the waters with it. Resident Evil 2, though, is one of those PS1 games that I would absolutely say is the PS1 equivalent of a AAA game. It's easy to see where it came from. They threw Resident Evil out there, people liked it, and that's like, let's give it a bigger budget. Let's put more money on it. Let's improve it, let's expand it. As much as I don't like Resident Evil 2, I can't deny that it was a very hefty and polished game. Final Fantasy VII would be another example, and 8 and 9, and oh, look at those numbers next to the name. Sequels are definitely one of the fast tracks to that kind of gaming. And early in the, I guess it's the 7th gen, the 360 PS3 generation, a lot of people realized that video games, the graphics had increased exponential, and that meant costs wound up increasing, and a lot of people weren't sure what to do. And a lot of companies, well, that meant that they stuck with their sequels. And early on in 2006, people were talking about sequelitis, how it seemed like every single game coming out was a sequel, because no one wanted to really take risks on new ideas because video games at the time were too expensive to make. Quote, unquote. At least a game that properly took advantage of the hardware and didn't make people go, why wasn't this released on PS2? Why is this a PS3 game? That was important back then, and that was a large part of where a lot of the cost came from. So it was around this time period that AAA games started to be on the rise, thanks in large part to Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto had existed for a while, but when it went full 3D with Grand Theft Auto 3, it made a huge boom. From there we got Vice City and then San Andreas, and those games were huge, friggin' massive. Again, building off of one another's success to become bigger, bolder, fancier, flashier games. And it made enough of an impact that people not so involved with the video game industry began to take notice. They were like, I want a slice of that pie. I want a slice of that Grand Theft Auto. I want to make a Grand Theft Auto. I want that. And so a lot of people, that was where we started to see the AAA gaming industry come from, where we started to have, like, people who worked at movie studios getting into game studios. We started seeing game studios expanding rapidly and working with other studios, and games were suddenly made by groups of well over 100 people. The graphics got prettier and flashier, but here's the kind of the problem. Once you start doing that, once you start going in the once you start trying to make these big expensive games right out the gate with no predecessor, there's a lot of what do people like, what worked before, what sells. And this has led to a bit of homogenization in the AAA gaming sphere. Everything is some kind of third-person action game, generally very shooter-esque. There's a major focus on some kind of open-world tomfoolery. They're always chasing trends. They're always, going after what's popular. And chasing trends is nothing new for video games. We all know that. I mean, cripes, the video game... Oh, God, I forgot about the first video game industry crash. Did you know that before the great video game crash of 1983, there was a Pong machine crash? Because we flooded the market with Pong games. There was nearly a video game crash before 1983 because of all the friggin' Space Invaders clones we had on the market. And then, the market was flooded with Mario and Sonic clones, and then Street Fighter 2 clones. There was the Doom clone period. People are always cloning and chasing whatever the biggest trend is, but with AAA gaming, the stakes are a bit higher, and things just get funky. That's all I can put it, but especially now that we have new monetization systems. Now we have these game companies putting out multiple special editions with spotty amounts of content. That's different for each one. The special edition pre-order chart showing what's in what edition has become a normal sight. Where you're sitting there going, how in the entire heck do I get all of the content? What do I have to do? What do I have to pay not to miss out on this? Then you have downloadable content and season passes and things like that, which have been getting out of control, virtual currency and in-game purchases. Now there's this major focus on making every game a live service, which essentially means sort of like an MMO, but not really, and trying to find ways to encourage players to log into your game every day in order to get them to hopefully spend money on things as they keep playing your game, which is very much like a free-to-play game economy, minus the whole being free thing, and the whole thing's kind of just becoming a mess. I have many friends who have been hoping for some kind of video game industry crash because of exactly this. Because the greed is out of control, a lot of games are getting kind of samey, and they're just really not happy with the state of gaming. And I can't blame them. And so, I'm very much in the same boat. And at first glance, you hear, video game industry crash. Oh no, that's a terrible thing. But then you, like I said on the last show, you have to realize it has become cheaper and easier for anyone to make a game. And even though my basic programming skills from when I was a kid have severely lapsed, I could still cobble something together for you in RPG Maker. So even I could make something. So gaming as a whole will never die. It has been deeply ingrained into our very culture, our very being. Video games will never die. The question is, if big budget AAA games have gone too far, when everything starts to fall apart. Like I said, Blizzard's in a weird situation, Bethesda's in a weird situation, Activision's in a weird situation, EA's in a weird situation. There's a lot of companies in weird situations. Honestly, even going to Japan, Square Enix looks like they're in a pretty funky situation, if you ask me. They've been dumping money into these overly fancy, overly long-winded projects like Final Fantasy Versus 13 and Kingdom Hearts 3 and the like, Final Fantasy 15. They've been dumping so much money into these ludicrous projects that have taken way, way, way too long to actually complete. And I've noticed them scrambling to re-release as many old games as possible. We're getting a friggin' Crystal Chronicles re-release. As happy as that makes me, as someone who really, really loves Crystal Chronicles, though we have no confirmation if it'll actually have offline play, I'm worried about that. As happy as it makes me to hear that we are getting a re-release of Crystal Chronicles, you gotta look at it and go, you're desperate, aren't you? Because, you re-released all the Kingdom Hearts multiple times. You re-released Final Fantasy X, X-2 multiple times, and we'll be re-releasing them again. You've re-released Final Fantasy VII multiple times. They'll be re-releasing Final Fantasy IX soon. I think it was already re-released on PS4, but it's got a Switch version coming. They finally got around to Final Fantasy XII. That made me happy. Now we're getting Crystal Chronicles. It's like something here reeks of desperation. Square. On the plus side, we're supposed to get Romancing Saga 3 in English finally, so that'll be good. But regardless, things are getting a little funky. And on that note, that reminds me of a piece of information I saw on my list that I can't bring up. Squaresoft has been renewing the copyrights for Secret of Mana and Final Fantasy Adventure. Which, if you don't know, Final Fantasy Adventure was actually the first Secret of Mana game, first Seiken Densetsu game. This leads to some interesting questions. Number one, there was a Secret of Mana Seiken Densetsu collection released on Switch in Japan a while ago, and a bunch of people were like, why didn't you release this in North America? And they were like, it would have been too hard because that would mean we'd finally have to translate Seiken Densetsu 3, which is what everyone wants. It's one of Squaresoft's best games, and it never got a U.S. release, but it was one of the first games ever to be fan-translated. Maybe not the first, but it was one of the first. So there is that, but there's also, back on, iOS and Android, as well as Vita, I think, they did a remake of Final Fantasy Adventure Seiken Densetsu 1. Now, I know they already did that remake on GBA under the title Sword of Mana, but that leaned a little bit too Mana and changed the game a little bit too much. The remake they did on, Vita, iOS, Android was much closer to the original game, which some would consider to be a very good thing, myself included, because the original game's main character was just a Final Fantasy 1 fighter. Little known fact, the first Secret of Mana game, the first Seiken Densetsu game, was actually titled Final Fantasy Gaiden Seiken Densetsu. It was meant as a spin-off. All the NPCs were classic generic Final Fantasy classes. Like, you get a red mage on your team and stuff, and you play a fighter. Like, the main villain was like a Mystic Knight or a Dark Knight or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the official translation was for that Final Fantasy 3 class. The point is, yeah, that I have a feeling that while they're scraping that bottom of the barrel, they might be re-releasing that on some systems. More than likely Switch and PS4, just going out on a limb there. So, like I said, a lot of companies are in a weird state. But like guy around here just said, we've been making ludicrously over-budget Hollywood blockbusters for years and for some decades upon decades. And for some reason, Hollywood studios are still in business. And I don't know. And video games, as he pointed out to me, do have an advantage over movies in that they can be downloaded directly into your home. You have your recurring microtransactions and so on. So there's things that can be done to further monetize a product after it's been released, and that's been a thing that's being abused right now. I don't know exactly how many of these companies I think will go under. I don't know if any of them are actually going to go under, though I have my suspicions. I mean, if nothing else, they could wind up being rared. That probably stung for someone. Because, you know, Rareware is still technically in business and owned by Microsoft, just no one who worked at Rare still works at Rare. That could happen to Blizzard with Activision. You know, everyone's abandoning the sinking ship, and it could just be filled with newcomers, and they could pretend it's still Blizzard and have all their IPs, but is it still Blizzard? That's one of those weird things you don't really think about. And that's kind of the strange situation we're in. But things have taken... The main reason I've been recapping this is because of an interesting piece of news that I just stumbled across that's going to make things even more interesting and could wind up with, in the long run, Sony might have just handed the next, console war to Nintendo. They may have just forfeited. It's, they've made an interesting decision. We'll discuss that interesting decision, later on, after we take a short break, because we do have a break coming up. You know what? No. I'll tell you their interesting decision. They have named a new president of Sony Interactive Entertainment, namely Jim Ryan. And this puts them in a weird spot, to say the least. Their previous head, John Codera, did not last very long. This could be a good thing or a bad thing. I'm going to need to recollect my thoughts on this one. But yeah, Sony may have either saved themselves or just forfeited the next console war. Very interesting situation we're in here. Anyway, I do believe it is time for me to kick you back to the music. So here is Pure Water by Mustard featuring Migos here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. And please stay tuned for more GameBabble Live, where we will continue discussing this interesting Sony situation. And maybe I'll get my friggin' show notes pulled up. Until then, though, here's Pure Water by Mustard featuring Migos here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for more GameBabble Live. That was Him and I by G-Eazy and Halsey here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell. Welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m., or at least tries to. Like I said, I've got some, I may wind up with some obligations that may get in the way, but as long as we're doing the show, don't forget that if you miss an episode, you tune in late, you want to hear more, you can always check out our YouTube channel, the GameBabble Live Archive, where you will find the archive of all of our episodes and a Google Drive link to the MP3 for them. So, before the break, I mentioned that AAA gaming is in a funky state. Personally, I'm not a big fan of a lot of the AAA games that are out there right now. I can think of very few that I actually enjoy. And as such, as I watch things get scammier and more of a mess, I kind of feel like maybe it is time it all burned down. But, as some people have pointed out, what seems like bad business practices can sometimes be like cockroaches that will most likely survive whether I like it or not. And it's like, it's nice having such fancy, big-budget games, but yeah, I'd rather have 5 smaller budget games. But maybe that's just me. Regardless, I do think a lot of American companies right now are in a bit of a slump, in an awkward transition period, in something. And what's not going to make things even better is, what our good friends at Sony have decided to do. They have opted to get a new president, Mr. Jim Ryan. Now, what does all this mean? What's this all about? Why does this mean anything? Well, come to find out, about a year or two ago, Sony actually moved the headquarters of Sony Computer Entertainment to California. That's right, it was no longer based in Japan, now it's based in America. And they did have a Japanese guy in charge of it, but he was rapidly changing things. His name was Tsuyoshi Kodera, a.k.a. John Kodera. And he led to a lot of very unfortunate changes and bad business decisions within Sony. So now he's actually stepping down into a sort of, what do they call it? Deputy president position, while the current deputy president, Jim Ryan, steps up to take control. On the one hand, it's good to get the guy who made all of these bad decisions out of there. On the other hand, this does mean that Sony is now an all-American company. It doesn't get much more all-American than Jim Ryan taking control of Sony in California. And this is kind of a problem. Not sure if you know this, but the PlayStation 4 did not do well in Japan, especially not at launch. It actually launched in America first instead of Japan. And it didn't do well because the game lineup was too Western. There are almost no Japanese games on it. The Xbox One actually launched with more Japanese games than the PlayStation 4, which was weird. Because of this, most Japanese games coming out at the time were not made for PS4. They were made for Vita and ported to PS4. Because the Vita was way, way, way more successful than the PlayStation 4 in Japan. Now, things have evened out a little bit more. The PlayStation 4 is starting to do better. More Japanese companies were on board with the PlayStation 4 until this whole move to California screwed everything up. Out of nowhere, Sony started implementing some pretty harsh censorship policies across the board, even applying to Japanese games. You'll notice I mentioned that with Nekopara, which started as an adult visual novel on PC. Then they had like a censored version on Steam, and you could get an uncensored patch, and now it's been ported to consoles. And while it is the censored, the lightly censored version on Switch, it's still rated M. The ones on PlayStation 4 are so heavily censored, they're rated E for everyone. That's actually not a joke. So, Yeah, Sony's been implementing that. That applies to even Japanese games released in Japan. And the big problem, of course, was that they had NDAs that they were using, so no one could come out and say, "Hey, Sony is forcing us to censor our games on PS4," until some Japanese indie developers just quit giving a crap because Sony was handling this very badly. Because come to find out, even if you're a Japanese game developer, you have to submit your games with proposals in English to the American headquarters during American business hours. This has very much soured the opinion of many smaller Japanese developers. And this is part of why things get interesting. See, Japan kind of makes a lot of video games. A lot of us really like our Japanese-style video games, and I've talked at length about how there is a distinctive difference between Japanese and Western video games, and how it has to do with, how do I put it? Basically just the way culture spreads. It's like this. You can tell a Capcom game from a Konami game from a Square Enix game, right? Same way, you can tell a Blizzard game from a Bethesda game from a BioWare game, right? But would you not say that a Capcom game is more similar to a Konami or a Square Enix game than it is to a Blizzard or BioWare game? Would you not say a Blizzard game is more similar to a BioWare or Bethesda game than it is to a Capcom or Konami game? We're assuming Konami was still making games. Just let it slide. Anyway, this is what I mean. It's like a combination of the culture that the game is developed in, and then, the business culture and who's mentoring who and how that spreads out, gives games from different countries unique feels. And this is part of the reason why I've started paying such close attention to what countries different video games are coming from, because it's interesting to recognize the feel of games from that country, what they do, how it differs so greatly. And for people like me who grew up on Japanese games, might have a little bit of a preference towards Japanese games over Western games. I certainly did. And as such, and trust me, I'm not alone in this one. I know there's other people who don't give any sort of a crap about Japanese games. But there are people who base their purchase of a console on the Japanese games, especially Japanese RPGs. I know many, many people where which console they purchase is based on which one's getting the biggest and best Japanese RPGs. Make of that what you will. Some people do that. But if Sony's an all-American company now, I mean, yes, their headquarters is still in Japan, but Sony Computer Entertainment is American now. And they actually canceled the Vita, which had a lot of games still coming for it, so that shows they don't exactly have their finger on the pulse of gaming as a whole. So, yeah, it's at least they're Japanese gaming, at least. So they're in a funky situation now, with Jim Ryan taking control. An American in America controlling Sony. Is Sony really a Japanese company anymore? And in case you don't know, Microsoft does not do well in Japan. They have a fierce loyalty to their home country. Even when Microsoft was bending over backwards with the 360, trying to cater to a Japanese market and Japanese developers, they still got snubbed hard. Less so than the original Xbox and the Xbox One, but they got snubbed hard. The Japanese developers did not want to work on the big American console. Well, if Sony is also going to be a big American console, what are the chances of them becoming the next Microsoft? Will the PlayStation 5 have enough Japanese games on it? Or is the Nintendo Switch actually going to become the hub of Japanese gaming? Is that going to be the centerpiece? Could it be that, of all things, that they change directions and Final Fantasy 16 could be on Switch? Could this be a thing? That one's a little more iffy. Square Enix really likes their fancy graphics and high-powered nonsense. But there is a very serious chance that the Switch is going to be the hub for Japanese games. And if that happens, I personally feel that is Sony forfeiting the next console war. Which is going to be awkward because what the heck generation even is the Switch? But besides that point, I think that could be a tide turner. That could be my mind is reeling from this. That's a very real possibility. There's a chance, of course, that the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5 being far more powerful will attract a lot of developers who want to make their games super pretty. But a lot of Japanese developers are even abandoning that, especially if they're making the super Japanese games. And you know what I mean by those. The Japanese games made specifically for the Japanese audience. Well, the Japanese audience is actually kind of small nowadays. Back in the old days, they were bigger than the American audience, but, Japan's kind of a country about the size of California. So, now that gaming has grown so much, the American audience is bigger. It makes sense that if you were making a game just to cater to a Japanese audience, it would be lower budget. Graphics would be less fancy. You know what the games look like. They're generally made on Vita and then ported to everything else. The Atelier games, the Hyperdimension Neptunia games, all that kind of stuff. They're clearly made on a lower budget with lower graphical fanciness. I don't know. It could get kind of funky. Those are the kind of games that I think, with just a smidge of optimizing can work very well on the Switch. So, gonna be really interesting to see how this plays out. Now, having said that, perhaps Jim Ryan will recognize that Tsuyoshi Kodera has made a bunch of very, very, very bad business moves. Maybe that's the reason he got demoted, and maybe Sony will try to right the ship that is currently careening into a freaking iceberg. But there's a chance that they could just keep plowing through that iceberg because they think that's what people want. And I know you're going to say, but, Jell, you just said it right there. The Japanese audience is smaller than the American audience, so it only makes sense that they'd try to cater more to the American audience, except you don't need to cater to only one audience. You can cater to both, and more importantly, there is a hefty chunk of the American audience that wants those Japanese games, especially as so many Western companies are kind of going over budget and homogenizing their games a bit and getting kind of funky and scammy. Like, back when Nier Automata released, what was it? Was that 2 years ago? A year or two ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. When Nier Automata released, there were a bunch of people talking about, the return of Japanese gaming, and it's like, it never left. It kept doing its thing with these slightly lower budget games. It's just that it was overshadowed by Western gaming. And now that Western gaming is faltering, you're beginning to notice the Japanese games that are still being cool between the cracks. Things are just getting really funky in general in gaming right now, and that's one of the things I think is really interesting. So if Sony becomes too American, they're gonna wind up really Microsoft looking. And I don't mean Microsoft as a whole, I mean Xbox. Which, I guess it's not doing too terrible, but it's not exactly doing great. It's gonna be interesting to see how this plays out. Anyway, hey, guess what? I found my show notes. So, we are going to take a break. And then when we get back, I will refer to my show notes, and we will finally get on with all the things I was going to talk about for the entire show. That'll be fun. Anyway, here's Machine by Imagine Dragons, here on 89.5 FM KCFE, the Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for more GameBabble Live. That was Native Tongue by Switchfoot, here on 89.5 FM KCFE, the Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which tries to air every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m., but no guarantees. Because, yeah, I've got a job offer that might be taking up a lot of my time, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to do the show. I need to sort out a few things, so fair warning. I will, of course, keep you posted on the GameBabble YouTube pages. We've got the one for the show that desperately needs to be updated, and, of course, the one for the actual radio show, the GameBabble Live Archives, which you can always look up to listen to any episodes you may have missed. You know, it's kind of a good thing that I was able to stretch out that discussion of the current burning dumpster fire that AAA gaming is. Again, remember, AAA gaming is not all of gaming. Gaming's not over. The companies may not, there's no guarantee that the AAA gaming companies might not even go under. It's just, they might need to consider maybe cutting back on the spending. Who knows? It's all a mess. Anyway, good thing I dragged that out because I did not have a lot of notes for today's show. But we got some. Let's see. First of all, the Spyro Reignited trilogy, big surprise, looking like it's going to get a Switch port. It has been, copyrighted in Germany. So, things are looking very plausible there. I don't think anyone is really surprised. The Paul W.S. Anderson Monster Hunter movie is set for September 2020, which takes place in our world and involves, the military fighting Rathalos. I don't know. It'll happen. I think it stars Milla Jovovich. Probably. Tends to happen. Moving on, though. Dynasty Warriors 9 somehow has a Season Pass 3 coming, even though that game is a complete dumpster fire that no one likes. Having said that, it's received a lot of patches, and I actually borrowed a copy from a friend that I need to pull out and try to see if the sheer number of patches have actually made the game into something playable and fun. Because they've desperately tried to salvage that game. They even patched in split-screen co-op, which I don't even know how that works. The game can barely handle single-screen normal play. But regardless, moving on, though, something that makes me happy. Ys Memories of Celceta is coming to PS4, and it's actually getting touched up. Memories of Celceta, which I believe was Ys 7, was on the PSP? Let me double-check that. Do I have that wrong? Am I thinking of the wrong game? Yeah, there. Okay, no, Celceta was Vita. Celceta was, in fact, Vita. And, yeah. It is getting a, Ys 7 was the PSP one. I think I might have liked Ys 7 better. I don't know. Okay, I somehow I got Ys 7 and Ys Memories of Celceta confused. Well, regardless, yeah, Ys Memories of Celceta is getting a PS4 port. I think they're going to be touching up the graphics a little bit, but not too terribly much. And, yeah, that does make me happy because the Ys series has certainly improved drastically over the years. I very much enjoyed Ys Origins, and Ys 8 is really phenomenal, and a lot of people are just realizing how good Ys 8 is. And that's available, although I don't know if they ever really fixed the PC release of Ys 8. I know they had a hard time porting that one. So that's a bit of a thing. But yeah, no, so we've got that coming to PS4. Meanwhile, Ys 9 is in the works. It will take place in a prison city, and it will be the most, current game in the timeline. The Ys games are, in fact, out of order. But Adol will finally be getting recognition for saving the world 8 times. Yeah, all the Ys games, believe it or not, they're all sequels to one another. It's the same guy. That guy with the red hair, that's Adol. He is the main character of all the Ys games. He has saved the world 8 times now. And no one gives a crap. In fact, some people even give him crap for being an adventurer instead of having a real job, even though his adventuring has saved the world. Well, now, in Ys 9, someone might maybe finally recognize that. Ugh. Meanwhile, an area of particular intrigue for me, though, is something that was announced recently, One-Chanbara Origins, which is set to come out for Nintendo Switch, a remake of the first 2 One-Chanbara games. For those of you just joining us, One-Chanbara was a budget character action hack and slash released back on the PS2, starring a woman dressed in a bikini with a cowboy hat and a feather boa fighting zombies with a samurai sword. Despite this fact, the game actually had pretty good combat once you figured it out, even having a training mode to help you hone your skills. It still had plenty of bad design choices and was incredibly low budget, but it had a charm to it because you could do some pretty incredible combos in it. Now, these games were mostly stuck in Japan. They came to Europe under the title Zombie Zone and Zombie Hunters. But we wouldn't see the games until the 4th game, which was on Switch, was announced. One-Chanbara Revolution was set to come to America under the name One-Chanbara Bikini Zombie Hunters. And when it was announced, people complained because we thought that the Switch version would be terrible, and we wanted the Xbox 360 game. So they actually relented and translated the Xbox 360 game, released them simultaneously, which they released as One-Chanbara Bikini Samurai Squad. Thing was, the 360 one was kind of a launch title being released 3 or 4 years after it originally came out in Japan, and it had a much more rushed release, but people kind of assumed the 2 games were the same. In reality, the Wii one actually wound up kind of being better in some ways. 360 one had better co-op, though. It actually had full split-screen co-op, which was there but not there in the Switch game. Regardless, those were 3 and 4. After them, they decided that the series needed a big refresh, and One-Chanbara 5 was titled One-Chanbara Z Kagura, and strangely, it did not come to America. Came out in Japan on 360, then had an enhanced, quote-unquote, PS3 release, which added in a new character, but removed the now incredibly gimped anyway split-screen play, and it ran way worse than the 360 one, which is probably why it didn't come to America. But we would get the 6th entry in the series, One-Chanbara Z2 Chaos, which is extra awkward because Z2 Chaos picks up immediately after the ending of Kagura. In fact, the opening is the end credits of Kagura, yet that was the one we missed out on. That matters even more because the whole shtick behind Kagura was that they introduced a new pair of sisters. Because normally the series followed Aya and Saki, but they were way, way, way too serious of characters for how silly this game was. So Kagura went with the plot of, oh no, have they gone evil? We're going to have to call in a new team of sisters. So here's Kagura and Saya, and they're half vampire. And they're way better characters, I'm going to be honest. I love Kagura. Kagura is fantastic, but we missed their introduction. And then Z2 Chaos was kind of a sequel port type thing, because a lot of the content was recycled from Kagura. It was a very early PS4 release, but it was pretty darn good, if you ask me. Saki got her moveset kind of ruined because she lost her grapples, and she's a grappler. So that sucked, but other than that, it was really fun. No split screen, but it was really fun. Since then, the series has kind of gone on hiatus, especially because the company that made it, Tamsoft, found a new gold mine with Senran Kagura. which started as a side-scroller, but eventually sort of morphed into a back-view One-Chanbara type game. And a lot more people liked Senran Kagura, which is an incredibly lewd game. But and I was always on the fence, because Senran Kagura has way, way, way more shallow combat than One-Chanbara. Senran Kagura is much closer to a Dynasty Warriors, except with more of an air game, whereas One-Chanbara was more like a Devil May Cry. And but people found themselves liking Senran Kagura a lot more because it's simpler, it's faster, it's flashier, it feels good to just mash buttons. In One-Chanbara, you never really have to go beyond mashing buttons, but mashing buttons is boring. You can, though. But that's the thing. In order to enjoy One-Chanbara, you have to dig into the combat system and realize there's more you can do than just mashing the attack button. But you never need to. There's no real reason not to just sit there spamming the attack button and getting incredibly bored. So it takes a little more effort to enjoy One-Chanbara. Anyway, series went dormant for a while. Schoolgirl Zombie Hunters is technically a spin-off of it, but it was a third-person shooter and it was crap. But now, One-Chanbara is coming back with a remake of 1 and 2 titled One-Chanbara Origins, set for release on Switch with a cel-shaded art style. And that's the part that kind of disconcerts me, because it's starting to look a little bit too much like Senran Kagura. And while I love both Senran Kagura and One-Chanbara, I will actively be pissed off if they just turn One-Chanbara into a Senran Kagura clone. Because One-Chanbara had much deeper combat, it had a much larger move list, and I greatly enjoyed it. Unfortunately, all we have is screenshots. They have not shown any gameplay, as far as I know. Let's see. No, I don't see any gameplay for it yet, which is unfortunate. I really want to know what that's going to look like actually in action. I will say the cel shading, though certainly a departure from what I'm used to from One-Chanbara, does make the game look nicer. Oh, I guess it is announced for PS4. I think it's PS4 and Switch. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so I'm concerned about that, but of course very interested as a longtime fan of the One-Chanbara series. I hope that Origins can live up to the series' legacy and provide a more polished One-Chanbara experience and not just become a Senran Kagura knockoff. Because that would just make me sad. That would just make me really, really sad. So that's where we're at with that. Meanwhile, that sums up most of what I had. Like I said, it was a short list. But things are looking a bit funky. Things are looking a bit funky with Crackdown. Crackdown 3 was announced as an Xbox One game quite a few years ago. It's been delayed over and over and over again. It is set to come out this Friday, but the previews for it have been less than stellar. And a lot of this has to do with the power of the cloud. When Crackdown 3 was first revealed, they showed this incredible destructible environment, and they were saying this is all being done because the physics calculations being done by supercomputers connected to your connected to your Xbox One by the power of the cloud. And that was the big thing Microsoft was touting, the power of the cloud. And people were like, well, what happens if you have a bad internet connection? And Microsoft's like, well, okay, maybe you'll have reduced physics if you don't have a good enough internet connection. And I'm just sitting here like, how do you even run physics off the cloud? You kind of need your physics calculations post-haste, and there's gonna be a delay if you're trying to contact a supercomputer for that. I just didn't see how that was even going to work. And now the building destruction is actually really disappointing, and they're saying, oh yeah, well, it's because the power of the cloud wasn't as powerful as we thought. Let's see. Now I'm looking something up on Eurogamer. Had it been ditched, it's dedicated server. Campaign at E3 and kids power destruction. Okay. So does that mean? Oh yeah, it's being made by Sumo. Let's explain that Sumo decided against putting the dedicated server-based destruction in the campaign. Played cooperatively by up to 4 people. The game could be played offline and chooses stories about saving the city and not destroying it. Okay, good! So, okay, that is actually good news. The server-based building destruction, power the cloud nonsense is just for the competitive multiplayer. This is honestly the best news for me and actually makes me interested in Crackdown 3 again. Turns out the campaign does not use server-based building destruction. It has little to no building destruction. And that's a good thing, because they are claiming the campaign can be played offline, thank goodness. Because I am, as a collector and historian, I am vehemently opposed to online-only games. I already told you about how Starblood Arena is going to vanish from existence soon enough, and how sad that makes me. And I realize Firewall Zero Hour is going to face the same fate. And it makes me sad that games that I bought, that I purchased, that I physically own, are going to disappear from existence. That's kind of messed up. I'm not okay with it. And, while I can be challenged on... While people can challenge me on the AAA gaming industry, I am vehemently opposed to online-only games that aren't free to play. That's my thing. If I have to be online to play a game, I expect it to be free to play. So that way, I don't feel like I wasted my money on your game when you steal it from me. That's just the way I think. So I'm very happy to hear that Crackdown 3 is going to have offline play. That makes me very happy. Now, if only I liked Crackdown. I really hated Crackdown 1, but I kind of want to play Crackdown 3. Admittedly, all they have to do to make me like Crackdown 3 is not have the auto lock-on skill, and it'll be fine. Because Crackdown 1 kind of turned into hold L, hold R, hold L, hold R for me. Because I didn't see a reason to do anything else in that game. So as long as they've toned down the auto lock-on skill, I might be on board with Crackdown 3. We'll see how it turns out. That's when I'm gonna watch other people play. But maybe now that I know it has a single player game, that makes me very happy. And I forgot that it was Sumo Digital, which is a company I'm all about. They made Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform. They made a lot of Virtua Tennis games. They made Outrun 2. So I'm very cool with Sumo Digital. I like them as a company. So we'll see what happens with Crackdown 3. It's good to hear that it might be not crap. I like it when games are not crap. Anyway, so that about sums that up. I do believe it's time for us to take another break while I look into some things. And when we get back, we will wrap up today's episode of GameBabble Live. But if you've missed it, if you're just tuning in, remember, I will be putting today's episode up on the GameBabble Live archive up over on YouTube. Just search for GameBabble Live archive. GameBabble's all one word. You might run into some other guys who have a channel called GameBabble that isn't me. You'll know if it's me. Yeah, so look up the GameBabble Live archive. check it out. We'll have today's episode up hopefully sooner than last week's episode. I only got it uploaded last night. I'm sorry. So we'll try to get that up and running for you guys. And, yeah, we'll see what happens. Anyway. Here is Dancing with a Stranger by Sam Smith and Normani here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay tuned for just a little bit more of GameBabble Live. That was Northern Lights by Death Cab for Cutie here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jel. Welcome back to GameBabble Live, kinda sorta. Video game news and information show, which tries to air every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. But as I said, kinda got a job offer, might be taking up my time. We may need to reschedule / possibly cancel things. Keep you updated on the GameBabble YouTube pages. Remember, if you're just tuning in, if you missed the episode, we upload our GameBabble Live episodes to YouTube on the GameBabble Live archive, and you can also download an MP3 off of my Google Drive, so that's all fantastic. Unfortunately, now I need to figure out a way to wrap up this show. About the only thing I can mention is, well, one thing I haven't covered is that Apex Legends is a thing. Yeah, the people who made, what's that game called? How did it suddenly completely slip my mind? The one with the mechs. First-person shooter with the mechs. First one was an Xbox One exclusive, and I did pick it up despite being all grumbly about it. Crap, I forget. That one, how did it escape my brain this hard? I can tell you. It was made by Respawn. Titanfall! There we go, thank you. Yes, people who made Titanfall. They made a new, class-based competitive shooter game called Apex Legends, and everyone's playing it except for me. It's nice that it's free to play. I might actually have to poke my head in on it. But no, instead, I went ahead and did the silly thing. I decided to try to give Fortnite another chance. And discovered I'm still terrible at Fortnite. See, me and Fortnite, we have a weird history. Because when it, first came out, I thought it was going to be a free-to-play game, and then I found out, what the heck, it's a full-priced boxed release, but it's in beta? Huh? Full-priced boxed release of a beta? And then they released this other mode, the Battle Royale mode, and that's free-to-play. But... And that's the one that everyone cares about. No one cares about the actual main game mode that they sold as a full-price box release that's technically still in beta, and once it leaves beta, it's going to be free. So wait a second. It's going to be a free-to-play game, but you had to pay full price for what? And then, the actual main game, which is Fortnite Save the World, it's not even available on Switch and a lot of other systems because no one cares about it, which is a shame because I care about it. I think that mode would be really fun, but I don't want to pay full price for a mode that no one cares about in Fortnite, especially because there's no crossover between there's a lot of bizarre design decisions when it comes to Fortnite. Like their lackluster shop, which only puts a tiny handful of items available for sale at a time. So you have to sit there and wait for the skin or whatever you want to be available before you can purchase it. And how, without that, there's basically no character customization. And it's, for a game built entirely on monetization through cosmetic DLC, just a lot of just weird design decisions. Yeah, at the same time, I can't help but respect it. For at least a few reasons. Number one, I like the cartoonish visual style. Number two, it is very well optimized. They have this thing running on everything, which leads to number three, it's on everything. And now that Sony has finally given in, it has very robust crossplay. And that was a large part of why I wanted to give it another chance, is I'm just fascinated by this crossplay. I grabbed it on my Switch now before I played it on PS4, but I was able to link my PS4 account, link my Switch account, And what little progress I made when I tried it on PS4 is transferred over to my Switch. I'm able to continue there. I'm able to play against people on all these other platforms. There's a way to turn that off, which I might need to try sometime. But yeah, I love the fact that all these different platforms can play together. And Fortnite is kind of at the forefront of that because it's, of course, the big popular game that all the kids are playing. And I know it gets a lot of criticism from people because it is played by a very young audience, but I can safely respect it for being on everything. It's like, this is the future of crossplay right here. It's on PC, iOS, Android, Xbox One, PS4, and Switch. And all of them can play together. All of them can use the same account. It's like, if your game is going to be online only and you want it to be a big deal, that's how you do it. And the success of Fortnite has actually been one of the things that a lot of AAA developers are blaming for their games not doing that well, which is silly. Then, of course, they keep trying to make non-free-to-play versions of Fortnite, which doesn't particularly go over well. And it's a very interesting scenario. But the best part is that with how successful Fortnite is, with its massive cross-platform play, this has caused everyone else to go, we need to be cross-platform like ASAP. I know Paladins is set to put in cross-platform play soon. I know Warframe is set to put in cross-platform play soon, which will mark the point where I play Warframe. Will mark the point where I start seriously playing Paladins. Because I don't like being sectioned off from all these other people. I don't like the way things, like, I don't like having to choose a system, because all my friends, at this point especially, are scattered across multiple game systems. I have one friend who has a PC and a Switch. I've got another friend who's PC only, another one who's like PS4 only, another one who's Xbox One only, and I want to play together with all of them. And if there's one thing I'm grateful for Fortnite doing, it would be showing how much cross-platform play matters, how big of a boon it is to your game, and I look forward to getting a lot more interested in all of these games once they're cross-platform. That is literally the reason I decided to give Fortnite a second chance. I'm still terrible at it. I might need to turn off the cross-platform play, because maybe it's the fact that I'm trying to aim with a Switch analog stick that I'm losing so horribly. It's something I can blame anyway, and it's probably just me. But yeah, also they added in like a new, like almost non-Battle Royale mode. They're calling it Team Rumble. It's like normal, except you get to respawn. And it's not the last man standing, it's two teams, whoever gets to 50 kills first wins. It's like, that's interesting. It means I get to... Things get a lot more chaotic, there's a lot more action, but I'm just getting utterly demolished. I'm terrible at this game. But it's a fascinating little game. And I'm intrigued as all heck by it, and I love the fact that it's massively cross-platform. Which, I need to stress this again, had they done that with Diablo Immortal, they might not have had the kind of backlash they had. If it was on PC and mobile and console, people probably would have been really interested in it. That Blizzard could have won the day with Diablo Immortal, but nope, mobile only. That's the thing you gotta... And I think that's one of the other things that's really intriguing, is how much the markets are dividing up. Like, China is very much mobile phones being central to gaming. Japan is very much about portable consoles and also mobile phones. And America is all about PCs and consoles. I don't know where Europe sits in there, but probably some kind of weird mix. And so, yeah, like, getting all these systems together to play together, if you're gonna focus majorly on multiplayer, that is a huge selling point. that knowledge that if any of my friends ever go, you know what, I want to give Fortnite a chance, I can be like, hey, I can join you. And soon that'll be the case with Paladins, and I can't wait for it to be the case with Warframe. I want to play Warframe, but the friend of mine who is obsessed with Warframe is on Xbox One. I don't feel like hooking up the friggin' Xbox One. I don't like that system. It doesn't know how to turn off. And yeah, I've got one friend who would be playing on PC, two friends who'd be playing it on PS4, and if we can all get together to play Warframe together, I'm going to be playing me some Warframe. But until that happens, a little iffy. But they say they're trying. It should be coming soon, and I can't wait for that. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of GameBabble Live. We try to air our show Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m., but like I said, I've got some job opportunities opening up for me. And so I'm not sure. I will try to be back next week with the show, but I make absolutely no guarantees. Again, stay tuned to the YouTube channel to find out what's new. Keep y'all posted when I know something. And if you missed the episode, well, it will be up on the GameBabble Live Archive YouTube channel, where you will also find an MP3 download on a Google Drive link that I will put there. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. So now it's time for me to end the show. Thanks again. Here is Every Day by Ariana Grande here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy.